everybody, and welcome to Taking Control, the ADHD podcast on rashpixel.fm. I'm Pete Wright, and I'm here, as always, with Nikki Kinzer. Hello, Nikki.
Well, hello, Pete Wright. How are you?
I'm doing so very well, Nikki. I'm very excited about our show today. Very excited.
Me too.
We're going to be talking about limiting beliefs again, but before you hang up and say, hey, I know everything about limiting beliefs because we've been talking about them for the last couple of episodes. Don't. You want to stick around because we have a very, very special guest on the show to help us through this conversation. Before we dive in, make sure you head over to takecontroladhd.com, get to know us a little bit better. You can listen to the show right there on the website or subscribe to the mailing list right there on the homepage. Just click the blue button and you'll get an email each time a new episode is released. You can connect with us on Twitter or Facebook at Take Control ADHD and call us. You can leave us a voicemail at 503-664-4ADD and get your voice, your thoughts, and your questions on this very show. We would love to hear from you. All right, here we go. Eric Tivers. Eric Tivers. He is a licensed clinical social worker, a coach, a podcaster, a speaker, an entrepreneur, and a productivity nerd just like me. He is best known as the host for the incredibly popular ADHD Rewired podcast, but he's also a leader in online video-based group coaching. Today, he's going to share his insights into limiting beliefs, but knowing Eric, we're going to be talking about a lot more than just that. Eric Tivers, welcome to the ADHD podcast.
Thank you so much, Pete, for having me on, and Nikki, thank you.
Hi, Eric.
Hey.
Well, we had the privilege of being on your show, and it was awesome, and we appreciate it. And we did Facebook Live for the first time.
Wasn't that fun?
It was so much fun. We're thinking about maybe doing that more often.
Yeah,
Are you doing it more?
I am experimenting. I'm doing a lot of dabbling with this and that, playing with YouTube a little bit, and the live stuff is just so much fun because I get energized by the interaction, so I love that.
Yes.
That's really what it does. It's a whole different kind of experience. It really changes the nature of the conversation, too, with that when you're doing it without a net.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So we're talking about limiting beliefs, and we have been talking about limiting beliefs and perseverance, and these are the things that, Nikki, I know you have been exploring with your, I should say exploring, practicing with your clients.
All the time. Daily. This is a daily practice. Yeah. Well, and I think Eric can probably agree with me on this. You know, when you're working with clients and they come to you with a challenge, and whether it's, I want to be more productive, or I don't feel like I'm managing my time right, or whatever it may be, it seems like when you dig a little deeper about, what's holding them back, what's that roadblock, as a coach, we hear these beliefs, these limiting beliefs that are really holding them back, and they may not even be aware of it. They may not even really understand or hear what they're saying until it's actually reflected back to them. Like where you say, okay, I just heard that you said you can't do something. And then like, huh, what?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yes.
Yeah. So like Pete was saying, this whole month we've been talking about perseverance, and he shared his own personal story of where he had to definitely overcome a struggle. I shared an experience of mine. And just to kind of remind people who are listening what a limiting belief is, it is that internal dialogue that we have with ourselves on what we think we can or can't do. It's who we think we are. It's how we look at the world. It's how it's what we think we're capable of. And these messages come in the form of, I'm not good enough. Again, I can't do this, A, because I don't have B, or, that kind of thing. And so many times what we find as coaches is these beliefs, well, they're not true, right? They're just a perception of what we think. They don't serve us. They keep us stuck, and they certainly impact our choices. And so I want to pick your brain a little bit, having a different coach's perspective on maybe some of the kinds of limiting beliefs that you hear. What do you see with clients and your listeners?
If I may too, if we can look at this idea of limiting beliefs. Limiting beliefs, I look at them as we all have a narrator in this story that we tell ourselves, that dialogue that we hear in our own thoughts, in our own mind, from the moment we wake up to the time we go to bed, right? So this is the narrator of our story, right? The great thing, though, about being aware that this is a narrator, that we can also play editor as well. And if we don't like the story, we can change the story, right? And so I think one of the things that some people are sometimes surprised to realize is that you can challenge that story. If you don't like that narrator, change the narrator, change the tone, change the words, change that story. All right. So I am right now, I think I'm 36. Yes, I'm 36.
Okay.
At this moment, you're 36.
Yes. So when I was 18 years old, I went away to college my freshman year, and first semester, I'm away at college. I have not been diagnosed with ADHD at this point, and I got a 2.2 GPA. And part of that story that I was telling myself was, well, I guess I'm just lazy. That's what my parents had told me, because they've always told me that, well, if I just applied myself, I could do better. So with the threat of being pulled out of school, if I didn't get my grades up, I did make a good decision to open up the books and actually try to study. Yeah, it makes sense, right?
Sure.
Well, you're feeling bold one day. I can see how that's a risk.
Yeah, I even went to the library, a bunch, and really, really studied, probably for the first time in my life. And I got a 1.8 that semester.
Oh,
yeah, I can see where this is going.
Yeah.
So, and I didn't understand it. I was like, I really did try. And so, when we talked, one of the things that I want to talk with you guys about today is the issue of shame and how that paints this picture for so many of us with ADHD. The story of what's wrong with me. I must be stupid. I can't do this, right? Because often we have these experiences that, we try something and the results we get are lousy, right? And so then the narration in our mind goes, well, why try, right? So most of your listeners, I would imagine at this point, either know they have ADHD or are exploring this and maybe came across this podcast, was recommended by somebody. And so they're trying to learn more about it, right?
Yeah.
So wherever you are as a listener on this journey, it's being aware of, okay, whatever my past experiences have been, especially if you're newer to the diagnosis or newer. I mean, I work with people who were diagnosed 15 years ago, but they now are beginning to work on it. Right. And sometimes it takes people that long to say, maybe this is more than just a thing about distractibility. Right. There's a lot of other things in there. So I think the number one thing that gets in our way of productivity is shame. Right. And so I call myself a student of Brené Brown. And for your listeners, if you're not familiar with Brené Brown, really do yourself a favor and look up her work. She has 2 TED Talks. She has a bunch of books. There was a pivotal a moment for me. It was maybe about 3 or 4 years ago. I was listening to an audiobook on one of Brené Brown's programs. And she has these guideposts for wholehearted living. And I tell the story as this is the moment where I got punched in the gut by Brené Brown.
We've all had it.
We all have. Yes. Both Pete and I are big believers in her work. Absolutely.
So it was her guidepost number 7. How nerdy are you? Oh, I love number 7. Right. Where it was we have to let go of productivity as a measure of our self-worth.
Oh, love that.
Oh, yes.
I can remember where I was walking in. I was near my office. I was taking a break during my work day. Not something I always do really well. Something that I want to do on a regular basis, though. And I was listening to this audio program, and I heard her say these words, and I literally stopped in my tracks because it was, that sense of yourself that you think you sort of maybe have an idea of. But then something happens where that reflection is as clear could be. That was the moment, So when I heard her say that, and this is when I just started doing these coaching groups. So I was in I think it was my second launch of one of my coaching groups, and I was in major perfectionism. I can do it all mode. I was in this launch, and I know that you guys have done launches, and you guys know how intense launches can be, right?
Totally.
So I was up until like 2 a.m., right? Creating content during the week of this launch, because what was the limiting belief? If I don't do everything possible, it's not going to fill up. And what was the limiting belief about that? If I don't fill up, if it doesn't fill up, I'm not worthy of people listening to me and joining my program. So all of these limiting beliefs were in my own head, right?
That's I love that. For me, I call that back pocketing success, because what you get from that, the opportunity that comes with that, the subversive thing that comes out of that, is when somebody says, why aren't you doing your coaching sessions anymore? You can say, oh, I didn't, not enough people signed up. But not enough people signed up because of the limiting belief. Like, you didn't launch, you didn't do the whole thing. Those are the kinds of things I think that it's the self-defeating spiral of shame.
Yeah, absolutely. And fear, the fear of missing out. And so, and there was an episode on my podcast a while back and this was during this whole period, and it was my week of my launch it was my second coaching group, and I was going to give a presentation to a parent group. And I knew at the time that I probably should have said no to this invitation to speak, because I knew that I was going to be in my launch week. But I had that FOMO, the fear of missing out. And so, and I was almost at episode 50 here. And I was like, when you have ADHD, if you do anything consistently, that's like, oh my gosh, like, when's the house of cards going to fall?
Totally.
Right. And so I was on episode 47, I was about to release episode 47, and I had not missed an episode yet. And so I was like, I can't not, miss. I have to meet this self-imposed deadline, because if I don't, what will that mean? Right. And I look back and I'm like, that's so absurd. It's like, what's the big deal if I'm a week late or a day late? But at that time, like I it's sort of that bar of success, or it's that double-edged sword. It was the same thing for when I was in college. When after I got that diagnosis, my sophomore year of college, I started taking medication. My first semester, I got a 3.75. So I upped my grades and I upped my anxiety all at the same time.
Right.
And that's really where my perfectionism was born. Was that really that first year of success in college and academia. So I was in this launch and just craziness. I decided to take my recorder in the car with me, and I did an episode of my podcast. It was called ADHD at 55 miles per hour.
Literally.
Literally. And I had people tell me it was like an auditory MRI of ADHD, because I don't think I finished a single thought or sentence the entire episode. And I was and I was so scared. I almost didn't release it. I was like, oh God, Brene Brown talks about that vulnerability hangover. Oh, it was big. It was
totally.
I don't know if I should release this, because I was talking about my fears, my feeling of inadequacy. And I got to tell you that I had so many people who reached out to me, who emailed me, thanking me for releasing that episode. I had somebody email me, and it's one of these things that sort of gives me goosebumps every time I tell the story. But I had someone that emailed me, saying I was beginning to believe that you didn't really have ADHD.
Oh, wow.
Mm.
And, it's that feeling of like, how when you realize that how much effort and how hard it really is to quote unquote masquerade as normal, or just be an adult, and to do these things all the time. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, that was a big sort of, I think, success hurdle that helped me with that perfectionism, realizing that, wow, like, people actually want to hear this sort of this imperfect version of myself. And so that was really, in a very positive way, very reinforcing, and let me sort of experiment more with more imperfection, which is amazing. Imperfection as a playground, and knowing that it's okay. Like, nobody even wants stuff to be perfect. It's just our own sort of, headspace that wants it to be perfect. That was really helpful for me. And, now I'm gearing into the ninth season of my coaching groups. And I had a really interesting experience. So, I'm a coach and therapist, but I've also been a consumer of coaching services as well. And so I had this really interesting experience. I think it was two launches ago, where I was leading into a launch, and it was the week of launch registration. Like it was the go time week, right? Where it's real intense. And my computer crashed. Like the worst possible, like hard drive failed, not recoverable. And I had a whole day planned of I had to edit these videos that I just recorded and all the stuff. And so technology, and I know that Pete, you had just recently had an issue with this as well.
Yeah.
And the worst part of
it just damages your soul.
oh my! And the worst part about this is now I can, with some distance between, I can look back at it and laugh. So in my presentations that I give on technology, I say, it's not a matter of if your hard drive or tech fails, it's a matter of when. So make sure you have a backup. And I remember having this thought while presenting and talking about that recently, where I just sort of I got to double check to make sure my backup is set up correctly. Because there was this those thoughts that sort of just pop into your mind and you sometimes don't fully pay attention to, but then in hindsight, you're like, why didn't I pay attention to that thought?
Totally. I just did that with Nikki. I feel like it's this thing. And I've started using this language. She said, hey, did you get this message? I said, oh yeah, I ADHD'd the crap out of that. Like I read it and then I did something completely different and unrelated. That's the feeling I get with this, with backing up. And because you and I have sort of similar, experiences with this, that thought creeps into your head. And, you say when you're feeling your strongest and most composed, you say, oh yeah, not checking your backups. That's a mistake that only happens once. But that's not true at all. It happens all the time. You forget to check your backups because that's what you live with, is forgetting to do stuff that you intended to do in the first place.
Right. So here's what happens. So I'm also a part of a mastermind group with a bunch of other podcasters who are in different areas of business. And so mastermind groups are basically each person that's in the group has a chance to sit in the hot seat and you share a struggle that you're having, and then everyone in the group sort of helps you with that struggle, right? So two things were happening during that week. One, my coach was telling me that I could push through and persevere. Now, this is, I think, the second time that I was going to do two sections of this group at the same time, right? And I was exhausted. I was on empty, and I just wanted to basically wave the white flag and just do one group, right? And so my coach was really trying to push me to do two. And I was like, and she even shared with me that she'd be willing to put my, to help me promote the launch. She has a really big mailing list. But it's like, I couldn't get myself to do it. Then my mastermind group says, you know what, you've done these great launches. You've been really successful. Like, if you do a launch, or if you do one group, or you postpone one of the groups and you're open with your audience, like they'll be complete, they'll understand. And it was like, because I had the permission to not to do it, it gave me the energy to do it. So yes, I have a little bit of oppositional tendencies I've noticed in myself, right? So,
but look at how crazy fueling that is. That is an amazing experience when you realize, hey, I can tell myself to screw you.
Right. Right. And so,
I have to interrupt you guys though, because I got to tell you, it reminds me of when my kids tell me in the morning that they're sick. And they're like, oh, I'm just so not feeling well. And I'll let them know. I'm like, you know what? If you don't feel well, you don't have to go to school. It's okay. You can stay home. And as soon as I give them the permission to stay home, I'm not kidding you. I would say 8 times out of 10, they go to school.
Absolutely.
It's the 2 times out of 10 where they're really deathly sick that they're like not going to school. But there is something about, oh, I really have a choice here. Like
that's a parenting ninja move right there. That's pretty good. I like that. So what I've learned too is and I used to make myself kind of crazy during these launches, like this whole measuring the success of a launch related to my self-worth. And what I realized is a couple things. One, looking at data is really important. So, I experiment with these different approaches and for these launches. And this shouldn't be a surprise at all. This is an ADHD group, right? And so 80% of my spots get filled in the last 20% of time left in the launch. Like, this shouldn't be a surprise, right?
Right.
It's like I'm talking about it for weeks, and it's like the last 2 days and everybody signs up.
Mm-hmm. I know that feeling.
And what I've have finally come to in the last my last launch that I did, like none of it frazzled me at all, right? Like I just had this belief that, you know what, it's going to be okay, and if it doesn't fill up, and this is a time where I actually did 3 groups, I was like, let's just see what happens. And what I learned from that was that it doesn't matter if I fill it up to 12 people or if there's 10 people in it, or if I decide to stretch myself and one of the groups doesn't fill up. Like, it doesn't matter, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, and that has taken me a good 2 years of really intense work.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the things that looking at the difference between guilt and shame, right? I think that's an important part of this discussion too, is this focus of, and I'm sure you guys have talked about this on the show, is guilt is focusing on behavior, shame is focusing on who you are as a person.
Yeah.
One of the things that and I still struggle with this, with the feeling of guilt, is I feel guilty that I'm not home enough to be, getting home before my son goes to bed. Like I don't like that. And, being a small business owner, right? It's like part of the great part about being a small business owner is you get to make your own hours, sort of.
Kind of.
Yeah, right. I forgot who said this. It's about entrepreneurship. It's like the entrepreneurs are the only group of people that will work twice as many hours for half the pay.
Well, and for freedom, to actually like go for freedom, it's like you still work more to get that freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Right,
it's
right.
crazy.
So bringing this now to where I've seen some of this. So what it's looking at the limiting beliefs of I don't anymore, most of the time, hold up my outcomes with my self-worth, right? And that has taken work. That has taken work working with a coach. That has taken work working with a therapist. And I am a therapist, right?
Yeah.
And so it will certainly still pop its head up. And I refer to myself as a perfectionist in a recovery, right?
I gotta say, because there's a couple things that I love what you're saying, is that you're not tied to the outcome anymore. And, that is something that as a strategy, I talk to my clients about a lot when we are working on a new strategy. So say that they're trying something new this week, I'll ask them to go into it with a curiosity mindset.
Right.
And, really just practice it. Don't be tied to the outcome. Don't judge it. It's not good. It's not bad. It's just what it is. And just go into the mindset of that. It takes the pressure off. And like you say, it's taking away that you're not tied to the outcome. That's not your self-worth. I told a client yesterday, who you are as a person has nothing to do if you have dishes in the sink. That is not who you are.
Well, that's a relief.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, seriously, but how, the rabbit hole that gets, that goes down. It's like, oh my gosh, why can't I do this?
It's kind of insidious too, because you end up like these things, the dishes in the sink. It's easy to say, to sort of cognate your way through it and say, well, I know that isn't my value, but it sneaks in when you start.
Oh, it does.
You start sort of subtly assigning value to these kinds of things that don't matter beyond their innate value, their intrinsic value. They don't have value. You're assigning them value, and when you stub your toe accidentally, completely at random, you assign some sort of metaphysical meaning to it. Well, this is just my luck. This is just my kind of day, and that kind of insidious self-talk ends up creating kind of a microculture for you of that kind of shame, and that's really hard to shake because you almost can't see it coming until you're deep into it.
Do you know the book? I'm trying to remember the author's name. 10% Happier.
Yes, we've talked about that book on the show.
We have.
Love it.
Such a good book. And
it is.
I love Dan Harris. Is that who it is?
Yeah, from Good Morning America.
I should have a gold star every time I remember somebody's name, because it's such a gem when it happens. So I love. There's a part in his book where he talks about what he really wanted to name his book, and I love it, and I use that line all the time. But what he really wanted to name the book is "My Inner Voice is an Asshole."
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
It is.
Right.
It totally is.
Right. And so when we could sort of acknowledge that and say, well, okay, so our inner voice, like, this idea that like we have to just listen to that. You get in the car And let's say for some reason the country station is on and you do not like country, right? Are you going to just say, oh man, the country station is on, I can't stand listening to this? No, you're going to change the station in like 2 seconds.
Yeah, right.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
We can do the same thing with our thoughts. And it's going to feel uncomfortable because our brains and body like homeostasis. They like things that they're familiar with, right?
Yeah.
So when we change it, know that it's not going to feel authentic at first.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like a new pair of jeans. It's like it feels kind of stiff and not uncomfortable, but like, that pair of jeans that you love that are so soft, like they weren't always that way. So you have to sort of get yourself fit into this new, a new mindset. And so much of what we do around productivity and just how we view ourselves in the world is around mindset. Carol Dweck's work with growth mindset.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at failure as feedback. I look at my coaching groups as a productivity playground where there are no mistakes. It's like we're trying stuff out and it's all this feedback. It's like, let's see, did this work? If yes, great. If not, why not? Let's get really curious about it and not judge it. It's such an important part of it. You asked at the top of the show about transformations. It's the last session that I do in my coaching groups it's a reflective session where I ask people sort of what they really felt they gained from the group, what they got out of the group. And I have had multiple people in multiple groups who never heard each other, never knew each other, say this very same sentence. And it was that at the end of this group that they learned to be more comfortable in their own skin. Now, this is a productivity group. And when you're dealing with ADHD, you're not just dealing with time management. You're not just dealing with calendars and prioritization. Like that's sort of like, that's the anchors of everything. But when you hear other people share their story and share their struggle, and you see that, hey, this person looks pretty successful, right? But they're also struggling with a lot of the same stuff. And you start to hear their external voice sound a lot like your own narrator. And you're thinking, wow, they're being really hard on themselves. And then you realize, oh, that's kind of what I sound like internally. Something shifts in you. And I think that is such a powerful message. And that's one of the reasons that, over the last 2-3 years since I've shifted, my business used to be primarily therapy. And then I started my podcast. And then I, on an impulsive whim on one of my episodes, said that I'm thinking about doing these coaching groups. So let me know if you're interested. And which is a true story, by the way. It was totally unplanned. It just came to me as a thought and I said it and left it in the podcast.
And now you have a business. Congratulations.
And I have shifted my business from being mostly therapy to a little bit of coaching to being mostly group coaching and a little bit of therapy, because I have found that, and I'm trying to figure out a way to get some research support to look at an empirical way to validate what we are doing in my groups, because there is, one-on-one, you work with a coach, you work with a therapist, and they could say, yes, this is common for ADHD, right? But when you are with a group of other people who have a growth mindset, who want to improve in these areas, and you're all sharing the struggles together and being vulnerable with each other, there's something about that you can't create a lesson plan for.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I do, because I do group coaching myself too.
Mm-hmm.
My format's a little bit different than what you do. But I would definitely say one of the advantages that I see is the connection. Definitely what you're saying is knowing you're not alone, hearing other experiences. And as a coach, as a leader of the group, it is also really great for me to hear other people talk about it and talk about what's working and what's not, and hear their experiences, so that it's not just me always, right? They're hearing a whole group talking about this. So they're getting more than just one idea or one experience, or, there is something very, very powerful about groups. I absolutely agree.
It cements the fact that there's no one right answer. There's no one right way to navigate life.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't really matter. I'm sure, Eric, you find this too. It doesn't really matter. Like I've had some groups that are all sort of in the same kind of chapter in their lives, but then I've also had groups where it's really all over the place. Like they're all in different chapters, but I see both groups working. It's like, I don't know. There's just a connection there that it doesn't matter if you're a 50-year-old businessman or you're a 25-year-old, graduate student who's just trying to figure out what they're going to do with their life. I mean, these things all still connect, and it's just a really interesting experience. I love it. It's one of my favorite things to do in one of my services.
Yeah, no, it's just so powerful, and for me, I feel so fortunate too, as being in this field, having ADHD. I just feel immensely grateful that I don't have to pretend that I don't have ADHD, right?
Oh.
It's something so powerful about that. Like, I think one of the most common questions during the course of my groups, and you probably see this too, is, what was the question?
Right.
and I'll ask that too. And it's like, there's just something so like when we can all sort of be in that space together and our guard is not up, but we can just be free to be ourselves. Like, then we can actually learn and internalize this stuff.
Right. And all of the calls are recorded. So if you ever want to listen to any of it again, if you miss anything, don't worry about it.
Yes.
Yeah. No, it's a great service. Well, why don't you tell us a little bit about your coaching group? You're probably having another one here soon, right?
Yes. Our next group starts April 24th. And I'm doing this sort of rolling registration because I'm trying to ease my workload during that week of registration. So because I'm doing right now 3 groups a week, and this is the format of the group is this: it's 10 weeks. It's 3 times a week. We have 3 different time sessions. So it's sort of like, do you know who Jessica McCabe is? She has the How to ADHD channel.
Yes. I met her at the CHAD conference.
Right. So I was talking to her about my group, and she's like, so it's kind of like a semester of ADHD school. And
I love that.
Can I steal that? Because that's awesome. She's like, go ahead, it's yours. Right, so it is. Awesome. So it's 12 people for 3 days a week, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Each session is an hour. We meet on Zoom. It's a video conference platform that's super easy to use, even for people who are a little bit technologically challenged. And so we, each day has a little bit of a different format. On Mondays, we focus on planning. The first couple of weeks of group, I always ask people on Mondays, all right, so who's planned their day or their week yet? And it's, it's kind of like crickets.
Silence.
Right, exactly. I'm like, all right, so I'm going to set a timer now. We're going to spend 5 or 10 minutes and we're going to actually plan our week. And it's like, because it's, with ADHD, it's like, you know what to do, but you don't do what you know. Right.
Yep.
So it's okay. So the power of that group accountability. Right. So then we do that. And then we talk about different sort of methods of planning. And then we spend a lot of time focusing on time awareness and teaching people to understand that they have to bypass trying to get a sense of time and go right towards wisdom. And we do that by, I have people predict how long their tasks, especially their routine tasks, are going to take them. Right. And then actually set timers and start those timers and track their tasks and record that time, which, sounds kind of tedious and boring, but super important, which is also why it's really helpful to do it as a group, because you have that accountability piece. Because if you can learn how long things take you, then you can actually have a chance at scheduling and having that schedule kind of work out. If you're scheduling and you don't know how long things actually take you, like, that's going to be a fruitless and a frustrating venture to get into. Right, so we spend a lot of time on teaching methods of planning, and we teach during the group like how to actually integrate your goals for the year, and how do you actually make that a part of how you plan your day and your week, right? And not have these be sort of these separate entities where it comes at the top of the year, and now I'm going to plan these my New Year's resolutions, and then I'm never going to look at those goals again, right? It's like
right.
And so we integrate those things. on Fridays, we review sort of like, what did we learn? So I give assignments and we talk about them during the group, and we really talk about the process of what was learned during these exercises. And we start the assignments together. One of the, on my podcast, I open every podcast saying that starting is the hardest part. So let's get started. So all of the assignments, we start together in the group, right? And then on Wednesdays, we alternate between two formats. We have a mastermind session where the way we do it, each person has a chance to sit in the hot seat and share with the group a challenge, a struggle they're currently having. And then everyone in the group for half the session is going to sort of fire off ideas and brainstorm and ask questions to help you gain clarity on a specific challenge that you're having. Which it's so powerful because it's like our context of our specific situations may be different, but like it's so relatable because it's issues regarding, decision making, prioritizing, a lot of things related to, am I in the right line of work? What's the next steps for that? So there's that. Then we have on alternating Wednesdays, this is probably my favorite part personally. It's called our adult study hall. And it's where we get together in our Zoom room. So everyone's on screen. It's kind of like the Brady Bunch where we have except there's 12 people on screen. And so what we do is it's all that stuff that I call important, the stuff that's boring, but important. Right. And we work together on screen on all of our stuff, like returning phone calls, filing, decluttering. But what we'll do in these sessions, I'll ask people to tell us what task you're going to work on, predict the time, show me your timer. Nikki, I found after it was 2 groups ago, I started to ask people this to show me their timer, and I learned that no one was actually timing themselves.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Somebody else well, we got the timer set, and no one was actually doing it.
And no one was really doing it. Oh, that's funny.
and it was funny. When we had that realization, everyone started laughing. And it's amazing how I've had people at the end of that first study hall in tears, because they predicted a task would take them 10 minutes. And when they tell me what the task is, I know this is not a 10-minute task. But, as a coach, I want to help them lead them towards that discovery, right?
Right.
And so they came back at the end of that session and in tears saying, this is I thought this would take me 10 minutes to do. It took me the entire almost hour just to find all the stuff I need to do this task. And this is the story of my entire life.
Yep.
Right. And it was, and so it's a lot of these it's because when you're doing this stuff with a group, you're now thinking about your process because you're sort of being observed by others too. So you're more sort of that metacognitive process is kicking in now. Right. And so it's just so powerful, the group dynamic. And then we also pair everyone up with accountability teams where you have 2 accountability partners that you check in with on a daily basis using Facebook Messenger. Just to sort of say, hey, here's what I'm trying to get done today. I'll check in with you sort of midday, give you a status update.
Mm-hmm.
And
what a great tool. And
so many people in the group will continue those relationships well beyond when the group is over. So it's really, I'm not going to say that everyone has a life-changing experience, but so many people do. And it's, it's a really gratifying experience to be able to facilitate that and see really these transformations really occur. And I've had more and more people who are now taking this group now for the 2nd and 3rd time, which is incredible to me.
No, that's great.
That's wonderful.
Thank you so much for allowing me to share with your audience about the coaching group.
Yeah. Well, you're doing good work, Eric.
You are. Good work. Shout it from the mountaintop. This is fantastic. And you've got a great podcast. And obviously you have, higher than expected caliber guests because,
Nikki
just saying Nikki and Pete have made an appearance.
Yeah. I think, now, what date did you say that this is coming out?
Well, this is coming out next week, Tuesday.
Okay.
Yeah. So your interview with us is probably coming out before our interview with you, right?
No. Our interviews are coming out on the very same day.
What?
Wow.
It's the ultimate crossover.
So as soon as you are finished listening to this episode, if you haven't already left a review for their podcast, first do that. Then that's so helpful. And truly it is. If you listen to an ADHD podcast that you like the more ADHD podcasts get reviews, the more it shows up in iTunes, which just helps everybody. I truly believe that it really helps everybody. So then go over to ADHD Rewired and hit subscribe. So now you'll have 2 ADHD podcasts in your feed that you get on a weekly basis. And it'll be episode 150, I think 7. And that's coming out same day. So it's like the podcasting time gods all aligned, and they said, okay, we agree to this, and this is going to happen. They looked down on it, and they said, this is good.
This is it is good. Awesome. You can come back anytime, Eric. You got all the language. It's fantastic. This is really a fantastic gift and a great podcast. And I'll tell you, even when we did that Facebook Live, that there were people who said that they were listening to both of our shows, on the same day. Anyhow, is so enormously gratifying. So for everybody who listens to our show, Eric's show, both shows, whatever, welcome and thank you, as always, for your time and, in particular, your attention. We sure appreciate it. You can find out more about Eric Tivers over at ADHDrewired.com. But, of course, just swipe over to the show notes in your podcast app of choice, and you can find all the links to everywhere that you can find Eric, that he wants to be found, and maybe some that he doesn't. We try to be thorough in our show notes. So thank you, Eric Tivers, ADHD Rewired. Go check out all of his great work. On behalf of Eric and Nikki Kinzer, I'm Pete Wright, and we'll catch you right here next time on Taking Control, the ADHD podcast.